Hello everyone and welcome back to the channel. So today's video, I want to turn it into a series, but if not, then I guess this will just be the only video. This is going to be about Proffie versus CFX. The reason why I'm doing those two boards is one, I not only have those two boards in my Sabers, but I also know that Proffie and CFX are probably the two most common soundboards that you'll see when you get into the custom installer hobby part of it, sending an empty help to a custom installer and having them install it as compared to a Saber company installing the Saber. Also, a lot of top Saber companies use Proffie and CFX. So these are the two most common high-end soundboards out there. So what I'm going to do in this video is I've already done two tutorials on Crystal Focus 10 adding sound fonts and Proffie adding sound fonts, but maybe you were confused by it. Maybe you don't feel like going back and forth between two videos, something like that. So I'm going to try to do in this video, compare the two. So adding sound fonts on Proffie, adding sound fonts on CFX as quick and as clear as I possibly can. So you can just have one video to watch. So I'm going to leave links in the description below to both of those original videos anyway. I'm not going to cover literally everything about Proffie in this video because I've already done that. And there's really just no point in doing that because it's just redundant. So you're going to need a few things. Obviously, we're going to start off with CFX. So I'm going to need access to my micro SD card. I'm going to put that in a micro SD card reader and put that into my computer. And then we are going to go from there because I need to take a look at the config.txt and the colors.txt and all of that stuff on my Saber. So we're going to get to that right now. This is my Saber's micro SD card. As you can see, there's 181 sound fonts on there, which is crazy. So I'm going to add, let's just do this one, Grumpy Uncle from Kyberphonic. This is an older one. Also, shout out to Kyberphonic. Got his hat on right here. Go check it out. This is a bit of an older sound font from Kyberphonic. This may be, a year and a half, 2 years old, something like that. So as you can see, there's no extras folder in here. But when you get the link to download the font, you're going to get this folder right here. And then inside this folder is three things: CFX, Proffie, and Verso. So I'm going to do both in this video. I'm going to do CFX and Proffie. So just pay attention. CFX, Proffie, Verso, whichever one you're using, you need to copy this folder. You're not going to copy this folder because this folder is all three. You're going to copy each one into your Saber and then rename it however you see fit. So Grumpy Uncle, CFX, going to copy that. This is CFX right now. So copy that, paste it into the folder. Once it's in the folder, you have to name it because as you can see, all the other fonts, they're named a certain way. Don't forget about the caps. I just usually name all of them in all caps, but you have to make the number correct in front of it. I'm just going to add it to the very end. So it's going to be 182. And then go down to the bottom and you'll see it right there. Now you're going to open Grumpy Uncle and you're going to look for two things. You're going to make sure there's a font_config.txt. It's a text document. And you're going to look for an LEDs.txt. This one does not have an LEDs.txt because back in the day, Kyberphonic used to not include those. So we'll just go into another font. You're going to copy it, copy the LEDs.txt or another font, put it into the font that doesn't have one. If you have accent LEDs on your Saber, then you're probably going to do this differently because you're going to want to make sure that your LEDs.txt is the same. This LEDs.txt does not affect the blade, it affects accent LEDs. So if you don't have accent LEDs, don't even worry about it. Just get any LEDs.txt that you know works because otherwise you're going to have a really loud sound when you turn on your Saber. So now we're going to go to config. This is my Saber's config. And then I'm going to go to Grumpy Uncle CFX, font_config. You'll notice that if you've seen my other videos about CFX, there's something missing right here. And I want to fix that. So we'll just go to, it doesn't matter which one, honestly. I'm going to go to a different font config, grab some blade timings, copy that, X out, and I'm going to go back to Grumpy Uncle. Grumpy Uncle, I'm going to add those blade timings in there, just copying and pasting. 300 is kind of like the default for most ignitions. You can change it however you want. If you leave this to 0, it means it matches the retraction. So I usually just put it about 300, something like that, and that's fine. Now start_blade to -1 means you're changing the blade profile through spectrum mode, unless you go in your config and then you find a one you like. So we'll just find a random one. I know I like 18. This is just a profile that I've had for a while. So I'm going to just change the start_blade to 18. It's like a flicker. and then start_color. That pertains to your colors.txt of your saber right here. So this is the ones that I got from Sabertrio, and I also used a few to modify. I know that Grumpy Uncle is supposed to be Luke, so green, obviously, so that is 0. So start_color, I'm going to go to 0, and then I'm going to save the config, the font config. So there we go. This sound font is now ready to go. Once you have that, you're done with that sound font. There's really nothing else that you need to do unless you want to go and change anything. You're going to eject. All right.
Go away!
There you go.
And the last thing I saw were the eyes of a frightened boy whose master had failed him.
There we go. Grumpy Uncle from Kyberphonic now works on this CFX Saber. Alright, so for Proffie, obviously it's going to be a different process than CFX. Proffie, you're going to need a micro USB data cable, otherwise literally nothing will get done. You cannot flash a config, you can't do anything really for Proffie unless you have a micro USB data cable, so make sure you have that. Also, I'm using this micro SD card reader again. Also, you're going to need the config that you have with your Saber. Now, a lot of people were confused on this part when I mentioned it in my video about Proffie. This config doesn't come from me. I'm not going to give you, I have given you my config in the past, but that's not where you get configs from. You get the config from the person that installed your Saber. So if you bought this Saber from Corbanth better give you that config file. If you bought the Saber from Crimson Dawn, they, on their website, I know for a fact that there's a listing for the config file. Go get that. If you got this installed by Jeremy of Solo Sabers LLC, I guarantee he put a copy of your config file on the SD card, so you need to go look at that. It just depends on where you got this Saber from. I cannot be the person that always provides configs to people because people have all kinds of different Sabers. So you need to have a config. So let's just take a look at this config real quick. Let's just open it up. So this is what my config looks like. This is my AniFlex config, like one of the original ones that I made for it. So it's obviously going to look a little weird to y'all, but we are going to adjust this just for the sake of this video. So I'm going to delete like most of this because I just want to show you like 2 fonts really. So there we go. And then this, I'm going to save it real quick. And then also you're going to need a few things. When you're going to put Soundfonts on Proffie, you need to Google Proffie OS. So look, I Googled Proffie OS. Then you click on the first thing, frederick.hubby.net. And if you have not downloaded this right here, you need to. Otherwise, you will get nothing done. You download this. Doesn't matter if it's 5.9, 5.7, whatever. You download that, you're going to get a folder. It's going to be called Proffie OS. Inside the Proffie OS folder is this. Blades, buttons, common config, blah, 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 all this stuff. Proffie OS. It's an INO file. So, config folder right here. As you can see, my AniFlex config is right here. My Twin Sons config from when I had my Twin Sons. That's where you're putting your config. Once you adjust this config, like I just talked about, once you get your config from whoever installed your Saber, make your adjustments, you're going to put it in this Proffie OS folder that you downloaded from right here, Proffie OS folder, and you're going to put it in this config folder. Otherwise, nothing is going to happen to your Saber. I see this so often. People never put the config in this config folder, and they're wondering why their Saber won't work. It's because you have to put it in this folder. Then in Arduino, you have to define the config that you're using. We'll get to that in a second. Okay, so make sure you downloaded this. Config, we're going to put in Grumpy Uncle. So I need to take the micro SD card from out of my Proffie Saber, and then I'm going to put the font on there. Once I put the font on there and name it a certain thing, I can make a preset for it for Proffie. And then we can do that in the config, and then we can go flash it through Arduino. If you don't understand what's going on right now, don't even listen to what I just said. I am going to show you in just a second. Okay, so now I'm putting the micro SD card from the Saber into my computer. So there we go. As you can see, I got all my fonts right here, all that stuff. Don't worry about it for right now. Grumpy Uncle CFX, that's the one we used for the CFX, obviously. Grumpy Uncle Proffie, that's what we're going to use for Proffie. Now Proffie doesn't have, the same type of settings files as CFX. Like there's no LEDs.txt for Proffie that you have to worry about. Proffie is just they just kind of optimize it right out of the box, essentially. So when you buy a font, usually most Proffie fonts are already optimized for Proffie. CFX fonts is where some people run into issues. So I'm just going to rename this one Grumpy for now. And then when we go into our config file, here, I'm actually going to do something because a lot of people called me out about it. Well, not really called me out, but they thought it was weird the way I did it. So I'm going to open something called Sublime Text 3. This is an app that's kind of like a text editor type thing, but it's like kind of more focused for coding. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to open file, and I'm going to open on my desktop the config. So this is what you're going to see instead of, I'll show you like this. Instead of like this, you're seeing it like that, which for some people is a little bit easier. So we're just going to do it like this. I'm going to copy this preset because I forgot to leave one of them on there. So I'm going to rename the second preset Grumpy. And then I don't know if there is a track on here. I can take a look real quick. There is a track. I'm just going to copy this track 1. I'm going to put it into the tracks folder of the Proffie micro SD card. And I'm just going to like rename it Grumpy or something like that. You can leave it in the tracks folder as long as you define that in your config, but a lot of people don't understand how to do that. So I'm just going to not do that. I'm just going to do that. Grumpy. So now we have the sound font's called Grumpy. The track that I want it to use is also called Grumpy because I just renamed it. And then we're going to do a blade style for it. FET263 is really the place that you need to go if you're looking for blade styles. I'm just going to do an audio flicker. And then we're going to do green, obviously, for Luke. Pre-on effect, I mean, you can go in and change all of this stuff if you want. I'm just going to leave this pretty standard, except for responsive lockup, mid-blade, lockup effect color. I'm going to put it as Sequel Trilogy because this is a font that's based on the Sequel Trilogy. Blast color, Sequel Trilogy, responsive clash. I'm going to put that to mid-blade, clash color, Sequel Trilogy, all that stuff. So I'm going to do get style. Also, if you don't understand how to check to make sure your styles work, Google Proffie editor, and it'll come up. It is another thing that's frederick.hubby.net. So you just copied that blade style from here. You press get style, it copies it. And then you paste it into here. Let me see if you scoot it over. Press submit. There you go. Now you can see that blade style. You can see the clashes, see the blast effects, you can see the lockup, you can see the retraction, all that stuff. And then you can go in and change. I mean, you can click on this. If you wanted to change this color to a different color, you can go ahead and do that if you want. But you obviously don't have to. So that's just how you check your blade styles. That's what I do every single time. I'm not going to put a blade style on my saber before checking it in the Proffie editor because I just want to make sure it actually works. It'll usually tell you if there's an error. So I'm going to go into my config. I just copied and pasted the preset above, and then I'm just going to paste the new style on top of the one that's already copied because I'm just going to replace it. It's so hard to get to the end sometimes. So usually you'll see black, and then it'll be 3 little things, a parentheses, a comma, and then some word, a bracket, and then a comma. You stop before this first comma. So if you're doing this method right now where you're just replacing a blade style with another blade style, stop before this first comma right here, then the word, bracket, and then a comma. And then you're going to paste. So obviously you see that it changed a little bit. So I'm just going to get rid of this empty space real quick. And then I'm going to save this config because I'm not changing anything other than this. So I'm going to save it. There we go. So this config is what I just changed. So as you can see, Grumpy, it looks ugly because it's in the text editor. So this config now has to go Proffie OS folder that you downloaded from the Proffie website. Config, there's a config folder. You need to put this config in there. Now, after you put that config file in the config folder, you're going to go to proffieos.eno. You're going to open with Arduino IDE. Remember, this isn't a full tutorial. I'm just going as fast as I can. You're going to open that in Proffie OS. And then what you're going to do is Down here it says define config file. I'm just going to do video_config because that's the name of the config that I just edited, and I'm going to press verify. I just want to make sure that there's not any errors before I go and try to flash this to my Saber. Alright, so most of the time when you try to verify or when you try to upload something on Arduino, you'll see these like 4 or 5, however many lines of this orange text, and it'll say something like changing start of section.bss by 8 bytes. Don't worry about it. It's not like an error or anything like that. That's like a known warning message that it really doesn't affect anything. So as you can see, Sketch uses 70% of program storage space. Don't worry about that. That just means that you have enough space to do it. So now what I'm going to do is I'm going to eject my micro SD card. I'm going to put that back into my Proffie Saber, and then we're going to flash this to the board. Once again, make sure you're using a micro USB data cable, otherwise your computer and your board will not connect. Okay, so once you have your Saber plugged in or your board plugged in to your computer, what you're going to do is go to Tools. You're going to make sure you have Proffie Board V2, all that kind of stuff. Then you're going to go to Port. Now, a lot of people mess up. They don't even open this Tools thing and they just hit Upload because they think that that's the right thing to do. No, you go to Tools, you go to Port, because 99.99% of the time, this Proffie board thing is not going to be highlighted already. You need to go and highlight that. So usually it'll just say, you know, whatever. I don't think Port, it'll say anything. You need to go to Port, and you need to select the one that says Proffie board. Once you do that, then you can hit Upload. Now, a lot of times once you hit Upload, if you see something, if you don't see any of this, and you just see a countdown from, you know, 10 to 1 or 1 to 10, I can't remember what it was, that means you did something wrong. It may mean that you didn't go and select Proffie board in the tools or the port. It may mean that your Saber's not actually connected to the computer, something like that. So you need to make sure that you do everything right. You need to follow all the steps correctly before you hit Upload. Otherwise, you'll never get this progress bar right here, and you'll never get to the point where you're actually flashing your board. You need to follow all the steps correctly. I have a removable chassis, fully removable chassis. If you do it correctly, usually after it's done uploading the config or flashing the config to the board, what it'll do is it'll play the boot sound of the first Soundfont on there, which is what it just did for me. So now what I'm going to do is very carefully eject the Saber from the computer. I'm going to very carefully unplug the micro USB data cable from the USB port on the Saber end of the computer. Then I'm going to put this back in my Saber. Alright, so now I got the removable chassis back into my Proffie Saber.
Go away!
Everything's good there. We have Grumpy Uncle on both the CFX Saber back there and on this Proffie Saber. Alright, so I hope that video helped you out. I showed you both for CFX and for Proffie how to add the same sound font for both. If this confused you or something, check out both of the original tutorials that I made. This was just to show you that if you have a CFX Saber, if you have a Proffie Saber, if you have a sound font, this is how you do both. You can go in and change blade styles for them. You can go in for CFX and change blade profiles. You can go in and do whatever you want, but I just showed you exactly how to do for CFX and Proffie, how to add the same sound font for both, and that's pretty much the easiest way to do it for both. For Proffie, there's a way that you can do it without changing the blade styles. I showed that in my other tutorial video, but this was supposed to be just, you know, one place, one video that you can do both ways. So I hope you enjoyed the video. If you did, if you learned something, let me know down in the comments. If you haven't already, please feel free to subscribe. Feel free to go check out my merch, landosabers.com. I have a summer collection that I just released. Feel free to go check that out. I'll leave a link in the description below. Thank you all so much for watching, and may the force be with you.